Welcome to the show, the three of you.
Good to be here, Tim.
Thank you.
Darren, I'd like to start with you. Since you were on the governor's task force and the scope of the focus of that task force was really statewide, all of Idaho, I want to start with you. Tell us a little bit about the governor's task force, its progress to date, and what still lays ahead in the months to come for the state of Idaho from your perspective.
Well, Tim, thank you. First of all, thanks for me being a part of this event. I appreciate that a lot. On to the task force. Early on in the pandemic, our governor, Brad Little, in his infinite wisdom, decided he wanted to kind of take this head on. And knowing that I was going to be retiring soon, he asked me and a number of others to participate in his Idaho Economic Rebound Committee. And this was a committee, and this was early on in the pandemic effort, recognizing how important business and getting business going or developing confidence with business and consumers was for the governor. And so he asked me, and we ended up with about 30 business leaders from across the state to spend some time on how do we get business re-energized and started again in light of the pandemic that basically shut everything down. And also the other thing I think that speaks to the governor and it speaks to Idaho is this is not a forever committee. And the idea was to get in, make some recommendations, and then make those recommendations to the governor's office and then move on. So our committee started in late March. If you think about it, Idaho didn't have its first case until March 13th. Shortly thereafter, the governor was forming committees and how do we deal with this issue. So I think that speaks to how we deal with issues in Idaho, number one. And our committee was really tasked with looking at three different phases of the pandemic. The first phase was really focused around how do we, in the very near term, help enhance consumer confidence, and at the same time, also how do we help businesses in the nearest term effort. And the areas of emphasis in that first phase was on PPE, personal protective equipment. People never knew what PPE was until probably March. But how do we ensure that businesses, in particular small businesses, can get access to PPE where they might not otherwise could? Because there was a run on the bank with all that stuff. How do we do that? He set up an effort through the state's purchasing group to get to allow those small businesses access to PPE. That was one of the first things that he did, and one of the first recommendations that we had that came out of our task force. So phase one was really in the near term. Phase two was more kind of in the midterm, and then we had a phase three that was longer term. And one of the other things that came out of that was an identification of bringing Idaho back together. It's plain today if you're new to the area, or if you're watching the news from time to time on television and other areas, you'll see a One Idaho campaign. This is really to talk about Idaho. We're all in this together as it relates to the pandemic. And so the governor and the first lady have been instrumental in pushing that One Idaho concept as we work through the pandemic. The third phase, I think, is probably the more important phase because it is sort of a longer term. How do we maintain certain keeping business open during and after the pandemic? And one of the areas I think, and this is important for businesses that are either looking at Idaho or looking to grow their business in Idaho, is how do we ensure that we have the right infrastructure in place in order to grow these businesses? And one of the things that came out, and Idaho wasn't alone here, is that there was a determination that we needed enhanced broadband services across in some of the more rural parts of the state. And so that is one of the key recommendations that came out of the phase three of that group, was to how do we ensure that we can help get this infrastructure built out for all of Idaho. And so that's a recommendation the governor is continuing to work on, is taking under advisement. How does it get funded? Because obviously that's a big ticket item, but it's also something the governor feels very strongly about and is going to be spending time on that again as we get through this other hurdle of getting businesses fully open again.
I happen to know that there were, I think, upwards of 30 local community and business leaders on this task force. And that's no trivial task to create a task force with, you are the CEO and there's other CEOs on this. But what does that tell, what does that say about our ability to to be proactive, to be nimble, small enough to know you, but big enough to serve you?
So that's a great question. So I'll characterize it this way. In Idaho, I think one of the things about Idaho, three things: stability, predictability, and accessibility. And I was the comment you made about accessibility. Idaho is a pretty amazing from a business perspective in a lot of ways. First of all, access. Whether it's local, county, state leadership, you have access. The degrees of separation in Idaho is very small, and if you can pick up a phone, pick up an email, a text, and you can get a meeting with someone if you need to do that. And that's one of the, I think, the real beauties about Idaho. And that's why when our task force was put together, when the governor makes that call, people generally don't say, no, I can't, I don't have time for that. They recognize the importance. We had representatives from manufacturing, from high tech, from education, from government. We had some of the legislative leadership on our committee. And so it was a broad swath. And I don't think anybody turned the governor down when he made those calls.
I want to turn it over to Charity at this point. Charity, tell us a little bit about the Boise Valley Economic Partnership, the work that you do, and share some insights with us with respect to some of the relocation trends that we're witnessing here.
Sure. Thank you so much. And thank you for allowing me to participate in this panel. I have the benefit of working for a great organization with the Boise Valley Economic Partnership. And really our mission is to bring jobs and investment into the Boise Metro. So we work with companies that are considering moving their operations, either relocating or expanding into the Boise Metro. We help them understand if this is the right place for them to come to do business. And then once they've made that decision, we help them get integrated into the community, making any connections that they need to get here and be successful. So it's a great job to be able to work with all of these different companies, tell them how great this community is, and then help them move in here and bring jobs that are going to help our community. This has been an amazing time, of course, to look at what's happening. And the shocking thing is, as the pandemic hit, of course, things slowed a bit, but since then, we've actually seen more business than we've ever seen before. So when we look at the companies that we have worked with that are evaluating the Boise Metro since the pandemic, we've actually seen a 60% increase in the amount of companies we're working with versus this time last year. So
wow.
It's shocking. It's not what we expected. And actually, as we talk to consultants that work across the country, they have seen overall a decrease, but they're seeing an increase in Boise specifically, but also in just kind of mid-sized cities. This pandemic has really gotten people to look at the very urban, very dense areas and consider maybe that's not the place where we want to put our next operation. You're hearing about some of the vacancies in New York City, large buildings. And so companies are really evaluating perhaps mid-sized cities are a better opportunity for us. This trend has been going on. People have been making those considerations, but the pandemic is definitely accelerating that look of perhaps a satellite office in a mid-sized city like the Boise Metro is a really good option, both for our business and for our employees.
That is fascinating. I've always described Boise as a tertiary city in recent months or years that is right on the cusp of becoming a secondary city. And I see this transition just got a big shot in the arm. And what I feel based on just having more conversations with founders is being validated here in some of the data. You said 60%. As we think about this positioning, back in the day before the pandemic, the lack of density, which also was at times associated with a lack of potential talent, was actually the reason companies shied away from moving to Boise, and specifically early stage startups that I deal with mostly. And so, but what you're saying is that very shortcoming, or previously was looked at as a shortcoming, now is actually something that makes us attractive.
Yeah, and I think, Tim, I think your point is great to say. I agree with you that we've kind of been on that cusp, and some of it is just about size. when we talk to companies and they look at the size of our metro, there is that concern about talent because they're looking at a Phoenix or a Salt Lake City. They're significantly bigger metropolitan areas. The thing that we're seeing, though, I mean, over the last 10 years, we have seen a 21.5% increase in our population. So our population is growing, which is just the numbers are bigger, and that matters. But you're absolutely right. Some of that lack of density that people may have been concerned about is proving to be a benefit for us, especially when you're looking at quality of life for your employees. And now it's also a health consideration of your employees. That is certainly becoming, I think, more of a strength than we would have considered before.
Wow, it's amazing how the tables can turn. All it takes is a global pandemic, I guess. But to keep pulling on that thread, Bill, I want to get you involved in this discussion. You know, tell us a little bit about the Chamber's outlook for the Boise Metro. What are you seeing? What are you hearing from members? And how are we positioned as a business community to thrive going forward?
Well, thanks, TM. And I'm very, very optimistic. I mean, I know we're in the middle of the weirdest pandemic and the biggest economic crisis we have ever had. But from a Boise point of view, I think I've got the best job in the country. And I say that because it's such an easy product to sell. As you look at what's going on, and again, we've become, whether this is good or bad, we've become the beneficiary of some of the negative things that are going on, whether it's forest fires, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's civil unrest in Western cities. We're getting a lot of phone calls here from businesses in Seattle and Portland and LA and the Bay Area. Okay, we're ready to move. What do you got for us? And basically business is open here. And as Charity said, our numbers of inquiries have just gone off the charts. And again, a lot of this is helped by a lot of media. I'm looking at 6 different articles I just yanked off of the internet just this month. You know, one of them here, the 10 U.S. cities that are best positioned to recover from the coronavirus, and Boise's on the top of that list. Post-COVID home price growth will be highest in these cities. We're on the top of that list. Just article after article that sort of backs up the demographic trends that we see. And the good news about the demographic trends, and Charity could give you even better stats on this, but our numbers of young, under 40 professionals moving in is one of the highest in the country in terms of the percent of net in-migration into our metro. So that bodes well for our future. We've got a great talent pipeline coming in here. But I guess the thing that I really get excited about when I think about Boise economically moving forward is the diversity of our economy that we've created here. You know, we've got a really, as you know, a strong tech sector here in kind of pure tech, but then various iterations of the tech sector. You know, there's a booming ag tech sector here, as you know. You were talking about hospitality a little earlier. Hospitality tech has got an interesting sector here, you know, with the sale of Live Res and with your old company, Becasa. I think of a member of mine, it's called eTrip Trader. They do the software for airlines and their airline crews. And there's tons of stories like that. And, you know, I came here from Washington, D.C., and I want to talk to what Daryl said about accessibility and about stability. You know, that's part of our message and part of our brand is the stability and accessibility. And when I came here from D.C., and of course, you know D.C., if I wanted to get in to see Senator so-and-so, you know, you had to write a check for $2,000 to get in and see. Well, here, they call me up and they come to my office. I remember when I first got here, walking down the street, and I'd met the governor a couple of times. This is Governor Otter at the time. And when walking down the street, he just hugs you and calls you Billy. And I tell my friends back east, I said, that's the governor. I said, I know I'm not in D.C. anymore. So that accessibility, and that's true with CEOs of big companies. I can call Daryl, and I know he'll call me back. You know, we have this accessibility thing, which is great. And I just like to think Boise has got all the stuff you want in a big city without the bad stuff. And I think we're going to be in an upward trend for a long time. Obviously, there's some sectors that are doing better than others, but that's the beauty of having a diverse economy. One can lift the other.
Yeah, let me pull on that thread. You bring up the net migration, and Charity, let's get you back in on this. Help us demystify this notion that, Idaho's being overran by retirees from California and Washington. I know there's some recent data that helps us put that in better context. Charity, if you could share some of those statistics with us, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a huge thing for us to address because we are noted as a great place to retire. And it's a great place for anyone. But actually, as we look at the data for net migration, more than 60% of our net migration is under 50. So, the majority of that is your perfect workforce. We do have retirees that move here, but actually, if you look at our overall population, we have a lower percentage of people over 65 than the national average. So really, the things that are going on here, the people that are coming in are by and large that workforce, and they're bringing their children. We have a high percentage of those under 20 as well. And so that's, as an employer, those are the people that you want to see coming in. They're the people that fuel your economy, but they're also the great talent that is going to make up your workforce.
And on that same note, Bill and Daryl both brought up stability, which is something I'm certainly benefiting from, having been here for 20 years. But can you help us put that in better context when it comes to unemployment, job losses, and maybe certain industries in Idaho that have fared relatively better than in other states?
Yeah, absolutely. And the stability is huge. And for me, that goes across the board. I mean, some of it is governmental stability. The government in Idaho tends to not do big, drastic changes that shift the world for businesses. And that matters a lot for the businesses that we work with. But even as you look at things like unemployment, prior to the pandemic, our unemployment rate was incredibly low. Fortunately, we have good in-migration to continue to bring new talent in. But the shocking thing is in April, our unemployment rate hit about 11%, which is incredibly high. In the August numbers that just came out, the state of Idaho is already back down to 4.2%.
Wow.
By some people's calculation, that is full employment. So we have recovered really well from the pandemic. We have gotten people back to work. We have kept people employed better than some of the rest of the country. For the U.S. in general, right now, the unemployment rate is 8.4%. So we're almost half, which is looking really good. And if you look at overall job loss, we are the lowest in the nation for the amount of job loss right now, as of the August numbers. Overall, our employment change is negative 0.7%. So we are close to being positive. So really great indicators. There's still a lot of uncertainty. We've got a long time to go in this, but certainly Idaho is looking really positive.
What are some of the areas that we ought to focus on? If you were to give Trailhead some pointers as to what we can do better in this ecosystem to help us prepare for, a year or two down the road, really positioning Boise to thrive. Daryl, you brought up, broadband. I know that the Department of Commerce here in Idaho has an initiative to broaden the accessibility to broadband into rural Idaho. But Bill, as you talk to members, what are some of the things that you could provide to us as constructive criticism, let's say, and focus points for us to work on going forward?
Well, the broadband issue is not a bad one. But I'll give you another thing to think about. One of the unique things about my job is we're one of the few chambers in the country, metro chambers, that has the Economic Development Group and the Convention Visitors Group under the same roof. Charities Group and Carrie Westergaard, who runs our Convention Visitors Bureau. And why is that important? Well, for one thing, we're not three separate entities competing for resources. You don't need, and the community gets a better efficiency. You don't need three sets of accountants and receptionists. But where it really pays off is the synergy in doing economic development. And I'll give you an example, and this sort of goes back to the broadband a little bit. So we have always been a state that would be ideal for large data centers for a number of reasons. One, because of Daryl's company, we have incredibly affordable power here, And the bonus to that is it's also environmentally friendly power. A huge portion of our power is generated from hydro. So we have affordable power. We have lots of water. We don't have major earthquakes or crazy crises that are important to data centers. So BVAP, Charity's team, frequently gets inquiries about, hey, we'd love to build a data center here in Idaho. And at the time, we'd say, well, we've got all the right ingredients, but we don't have any kind of incentive because those are so equipment heavy. Can you give us some kind of incentive on the equipment? So they come over to the chamber side and we do the advocacy stuff. And for 3 years, we advocated at the legislature for some sort of incentive for data centers, particularly around equipment. Finally got that last year. So then I walked down the hallway to Carrie and I said, you know, it would be great. Let's get I forget the name of it, but let's get the National Association of Data Center Managers Convention to come here to Boise, Idaho. Who better than to have 400 of those people walking around town to see just what we're all about. So that kind of synergy between the three of us and how that relates to broadband, as you know, wherever these data centers go, and I use my example of my friends in Iowa who are sort of the poster child for data centers, it truly upgraded broadband across the entire state of Iowa just by the pure infrastructure that these guys needed in the first place. So that's solving a problem by creating another opportunity and another piece of diversity of our of our local economy. And again, I go back to, I think the reason we're going to be so successful and continue to be successful is this economic diversity that we have. We're not a one horse town here.
Now, I'm glad you're bringing that up. It's a key point to me is the interdependency between building out infrastructure, broadband, and data centers. Like you said, if you build it, they will come kind of comes to mind. But specifically, I'm excited you mentioned data centers because there are case studies after case studies that show that data centers bring with them to communities an incredible amount of high-paying jobs. They also attract talent. They attract other employers that now are taking notice of data centers that would be located in Boise. So it's a greater ecosystem play, really. And congratulations to you and your team for getting that done last year. And I can't wait to see a picture of you on social media with that giant scissor opening up the next great data center here. With that understanding, Charity, if you could maybe speak to, in terms of industries, talent, and relocating people here, what can we do better? What are some of the focus areas that we as a community can rally behind so that we just do a better job overall?
Yeah, thank you. I think we do a good job. I think we've got a lot of really positive things going on, but of course there's always opportunities. And Tim, you and I have talked about this a little bit, but I do think there's an opportunity to sync up some of the work HUD does and some of the work that we do to make sure that we're bringing together the startup world and the business attraction world and the existing businesses through the chamber and Bill's work. I think there's some opportunity for us to partner more closely to make sure that we are all working together to that same goal. We are working together on the same goal, but make sure that we're doing it in a more connected way because those things all work together. So existing companies are more attracted to a community that has a great startup culture. Startup cultures need funding and support from existing businesses and people in those businesses. So there's a huge connection. I think we could do better at pulling that together and making sure that we're connecting all those dots. So I think that's huge. I also think actually things like this are really important. We tend to be pretty humble in Idaho, and maybe sometimes we don't get enough of the message out of what there is to offer here and what a huge benefit there is. So I do think that there needs to be just more showcasing what is available here for startups and for existing businesses for the business community to make sure you really understand what this community is like and that we are not maybe the Idaho that you thought of in the 80s. And there's been a lot of transformation. This growth matters in our community and also our economy.
One of the things as people are looking to Idaho is understanding the business climate. And one of the things that I think the climate in Idaho is very business friendly. And I say that on a number of fronts. From a standpoint of getting your business started, we streamline that process. The governor in particular has taken it upon himself to streamline the regulations in Idaho. We were recognized, I think, as one of the least regulated states from starting a business in the country. And another example of this, while it's large, but the notion of Amazon coming in with their distribution center, 2.5 million square feet, going to likely be up and running in 11 months, which is a pretty incredible feat in and of itself. And the other thing I think it's important for startups to also recognize is the state's economic climate, the business climate is such that we are mandated by statute, by constitution, to have a balanced budget every year. And the governor and the legislature does that every year. So you don't have built up phantom taxes potentially coming down the road for unfunded mandates that haven't been paid for already. And I think that's an important thing. Idaho shows up on a lot of top 10 lists, but a couple of the top 10 lists I think are really important. One of those is the second lowest property tax in the country list by the Tax Foundation. We're in the top 10 most friendly tax states, and Idaho is in the top 10 states for unemployment trust fund balances and in top 10 states for rainy day fund balances. So all of those suggest that Idaho's economic condition, even coming through the pandemic to date, is very strong. The state just closed their fiscal year end in June 30 with a surplus, which again, I don't know how many states can say that that's happened to them. So if you're looking to come to Idaho, as Bill said earlier, Idaho is open for business, and Idaho is managing very well through this pandemic, as is indicated by its overall tax proceeds that are coming in to be able to create a surplus.
You bring up an important point that I hadn't advertised about Idaho much, but I am now. A few startup founders that are in the later stages of their startups have talked to me recently, specifically from California, and they brought up to me that selling their company, which is a plausible end horizon for many startups, selling their company from a tax perspective is much more lucrative in Idaho than it would be in California. As an ED of Trailhead, I'm still learning those things that we have to offer, and I'm learning to better advertise them. And to go back to Charity's point about working better together, it really sounds like, the chamber has mastered the synergy between the three entities that work under your umbrella. Let's just add Trailhead to be a very effective partner and build on that synergy. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then I look to the chamber to sort of tell us what we can do to help with that. And with that, guys, we're out of time. I want to make sure, for one, that I thank the three of you for all the work that you do for our community in terms of economic development. And I want to thank you for your time and joining us today for Boise Startup Week and this panel discussion. Again, this is Tiam Rastegar. I'm the co-chair of Boise Startup Week. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.